The first book that I picked up in March, or I guess not picked up, but finished in March, was Heir of Fire. Heir of Fire! Hello everybody, my name is Kelsey, and we're about to get very, very nerdy with my March wrap-up. So in March, I was able to read 10 books, which is fantastic. They were a little bit all over the place, to be honest, looking at the stack I've got here. Some random ones, some buddy reads, some vlog things that I was doing. So a bit of a hodgepodge this month, but let's just dive right into the stats. So like I mentioned, I read 10 books, and that was over 3,207 pages, which was about 83 hours listened, and that was over 3 audiobooks, 2 physical books, 1 ebook, and 4 mixed. Age categories, we had 2 middle grade, 1 YA, and 7 adult books. The genres, we had a little bit more variety this month. We had 2 fantasy, 3 romance, 2 contemporary, 1 mystery thriller, 1 historical fiction, and 1 nonfiction. And ratings, we had 1 5-star, finally, 7 4-stars, and 2 3-stars. The first book that I completed in March was Heir of Fire by Sarah J. Maas. This is the 3rd book in the Throne of Glass series. Trigger warnings in this one, like always with her books, or at least in this series, is torture and the trauma that comes from it. So, I don't want to talk a whole lot about this. Again, it's a 3rd in a series. It's about to be like a very long series. Things are happening. We were in a very different place than we were when we started this series. But this series does, or at least the first book, follow our main character, Selena Sardothien, who's an assassin and has been in jail, or I guess slave mines, basically, for that. And the book starts with the king of this like terrible empire that she lives in wanting a right-hand man, wanting a king's champion, which is basically like a hired assassin to do whatever he tells them to do. And so we hold like a competition, and like all of these different people in the court bring forth a competitor, and so she becomes the prince's competitor in this competition. This is a very different book. We're in a very different situation. We do meet some characters in this book that I know are going to be important for like the rest of the series. Like there was a character specifically whose name I knew before I even started this series as being like a major player. So it was really interesting to finally meet that character and see the dynamic between them and Selena. I feel like we learned a lot about the world in this one, or at least like a part of the world. We also learned a lot about Selena's like backstory a little bit, because we did have a relatively big twist at the end of the 2nd book, and so this one starts off with us finally being able to dive into some elements about that, which I liked. This one I gave 4.5 stars. I've discovered that at least with the Throne of Glass series, I think the first one is the only exception, that each of these books, it's kind of a slog to get into. The ending is always worth it. Like the ending usually I can't stop reading, which was the case with this one, but this book, like the last, at least the last one, it took me a while to get into. There was a lot of like stuff happening, but then at the same time there also wasn't a lot of stuff happening, and the characters that we have come to know so far in this series were all in different places, and so like we didn't have that dynamic, which honestly I'm not upset about, to be honest, because some of those characters drive me nuts. So like there were elements of this that it just took me a while to get into, and then once I did, the payoff was worth it. This did not feel like a filler book, but it did feel like a transitional book where we had to meet some people, we had to put some of the puzzle pieces into play, and then the next book, because there's what, 4? We've reached the halfway point. There's 4 more books in the series, and I know that whatever big plot thing that twists this entire series into something totally different is going to happen in the next book. So I'm very interested to see what that is. But like this kind of put all of the pieces and the people, I think, in place for us to have whatever that next big thing is. So it's not my favorite, but I did enjoy my time reading it. I also just love the character of Selena. Like I know she drives people nuts because she kind of goes into situations not talking it out and just kind of like winging it and doing what she thinks is best. And sometimes it's not the best strategy, because she's very hot-headed. But there was like a moment, at least at the end of this book, and like there's a throne room. If you read this book, you know what I mean. She's in a throne room and she's having like a discussion, and there's just like, that scene made me so happy. She was so like badass in that scene, and I loved everything about it. So I love her. Okay, I'm definitely obsessed with the series. It's fine. Like it's an enjoyable series. I don't know what else to say about it. It was good. I enjoyed my time reading it. I can't wait to keep continuing with this series and kind of know what all of the love surrounding Throne of Glass is all about. And I feel like the next book is going to be really telling for me whether or not this is going to be an all-time favorite series or if this is just going to be a series that I am just really enjoying and will hold on to and we'll come back to and we'll talk about the lore with people who also love Sarah J. Maas. But like I think the next book is going to decide which way this series is going to go for me. But I still really enjoyed my time reading it and I'm glad that I have continued to read it and we're now one step closer because it seems to be taking a while for me to just really dive in. Okay, the next book that I read was for one of my book clubs, and that is American Dirt. And this is by Janine Cummins. I ended up giving this one 3 stars. Trigger warnings in this book, and I'm sure I've missed some, but these are the ones that I picked up on. Murder, sexual assault or rape, mentions of suicide, miscarriage, and child death. So just everything that's bad is probably in this book in some way. This book follows, basically there are 2 main characters, Lydia and her son, Luca. And at the very beginning of the book, okay, a little bit of backstory about the beginning of the book, her husband is a reporter, specifically for like crime and gangs in the area. And so he ends up putting out an expose on this new crime boss. And because of that, this crime boss puts a hit out on him and his entire family. And so the book starts with Lydia and Luca being the only survivors of this family. And so they go on the run. And so it's like the whole book is their story on the way up to the north and kind of like what happens, the people they meet along the way. This is by no stretch of the imagination a happy book. It is a really tough book. It is like nothing good happens, really. There are some moments of hope and happiness throughout the book, but it's just one of those books that like it's really hard to read, and that's why it got 3 stars from me personally. I think this is a very well done book. I think the writing itself, like the writing style, is very fascinating. There is some controversy with the author, which we'll talk about in a second, and like the publishing and everything. But like as far as this book goes, for what it is, it's a story that's really hard to read, and because of that, I was kind of like pushing myself through reading situations that probably would have DNF'd other books for, but it was for a book club, so that's why I kind of was like pushing through. And it's purely based on what happened in this book, not because I think this book is bad or anything like that. I just think that like the situations in this book are really hard to read at times, and that you have to kind of like know your own mental health before diving into it. So like I had just mentioned, there is some controversy about the author and there is some controversy about the publication of this. I am not the person to really talk on that, so I would suggest just kind of looking into it yourself. I think that this book is a really good starting place. If you don't know a lot about the horrors that go into immigration, or maybe immigration is not the right word, but like they basically become migrants who like travel on trains to get to the north, and like what happens when they get to the border, how does that work, and seeing them possibly get into the United States, like all of the little pieces that are woven like that. I think this is a good way, if you have no idea about any of that, this is a good starting place. I think there are definitely other books who maybe are written by people who are more our own voices, would be probably a better option. But if you have no idea about anything and you're curious about this book, this is definitely, I think, a good jumping off point. I talked about this on my in my Goodreads reviews, so like go check it out because I was significantly more eloquent than I am trying to be here. But I enjoyed, that's not the right word, because I didn't enjoy my time reading this. It was a really hard book. This reminds me of my experience reading The Nightingale by Christiana, where like I was glad the book existed. I was glad that I had read the book, but I could not say that I had enjoyed my time reading it because nothing about this experience was fun, but it did feel very poignant for the time, and I felt like I was thinking about things in a different way, or was thinking about things that I had never thought about before. And so having this conversation, at least starting this conversation, I think was an interesting choice. I am very glad to see the back of this book, I'm not gonna lie. It was just not a fun experience, and I'm glad I read it, but I'm also glad that I'm done with it. I then finished another buddy read, which was End of Story by Kylie Scott. This is a very quick romance. I ended up giving this one 3 stars as well. This follows our main two characters, Susie and this guy named Lars, who was her ex's best friend. So the book starts with her inheriting the house of her aunt, who basically is like a parent to her. And she's going to go like all HGTV on it and like redesign it. And she hasn't decided if she's staying or selling, but like she needs to like renovate parts of it. And so she hires the company that Lars works for, knowing that he works for them, but not sure if he's the one she's going to get, because she and said ex had an incredibly public, terrible breakup. And so the book starts with Lars showing up as like the person who's going to renovate the house, or at least start the renovation. And that's fine, great, whatever. They move on. He starts tearing down a wall, or like parts of a wall, and they find a piece of paper in the wall. Okay, very interesting. Maybe it's historical. It's actually a divorce certificate with both of their names on it, and it's dated 10 years in the future. And that is where the story starts. So there's this like fantastical element with these two characters as they navigate what that means. And do they have feelings or do they not? Like, what, are we friends or are we not? Like, what is the situation? The setup. Okay, obviously this whole like divorce situation that like isn't happening but is also in the future. Fascinating. I would have liked to see a little bit more fantastical elements about it, because it felt like there wasn't, like, it kind of like was introduced, and it is like a big pushing point in the plot, and then it just kind of ended. It felt like the author was like, I don't really feel like I want to write an ending, so here. And it just didn't feel right. Also, I didn't love the way this was written. The writing style was kind of meh. And I also found, like, I listened to this on audiobook, and I found myself like skipping through the smutty scenes, because this author used a couple of words that without fail takes me out of the story immediately. Sometimes when I know it's coming, it's not that bad, but I did not know that those words were coming, and so when they were thrown randomly into the situation, they take me out of the plan. They take me out of the plot. They take me out of the story. So I definitely like would skim some scenes because I didn't like how they were written. It was an interesting story. I think the setup was really interesting. I think the execution was not so great. I did like the relationship in this book, though. It felt very adult. They talked about their problems. They didn't assume things about the other person. They like actually sat down and said, okay, what is your side of this story or this situation or whatever it is? So they were very adult about it, and I enjoyed that part. That was well done. I don't know, there was just a lot of like conveniences in this plot. There was a lot of things that I feel like this could have benefited from some editing and maybe some fleshing out in some scenes. It was fine. It was fine. But both me and my friend who picked this one up at the same time decided that we are going to immediately unhaul it, because like I'm glad I read it because I was curious about that plot, and it would have like haunted me if I hadn't have picked it up. But I don't need, and I'm good. The next one was from my other book club, and that was Local Woman Missing by Mary Kubica, I believe is how you pronounce it. I ended this one 4 stars. Trigger warnings in this book for capture, torture, sexual assault, birth trauma, just anything that has to do with birth trauma, mentions of suicide and self-harm, as well as miscarriage. This is a murder mystery, and it follows this town where a woman goes missing, and then like not too long later another woman and her daughter go missing, and it's been 10 years, and that daughter just shows up randomly, is found. This is told in multiple points of view in multiple timelines. There is the present timeline where the girl shows up 10 years later, and we mainly follow her brother's perspective in that one, as well as hers, but her brother's perspective specifically. And then you have when, like, the night 10 years previously, when the girl and her mother go missing, and it shows like the case of that being figured out. And then it also shows a timeline of about 3 to 4 months before that, and that's from the mother's perspective, who ends up going missing. So you have like multiple points of view, you have multiple timelines, and it's really twisty-turvy. And so when you have multiple timelines, I usually get really confused. I usually do not like things like that. If it's 2, the past and the present, that's fine. But when you get into like the weeds with some of these, I was really worried about it. But I followed the whole thing. I really enjoyed the way this was written. I really liked seeing those multiple different perspectives, because like I said, we follow the woman who goes missing, and in the present we follow her daughter and her son, and then in the past we follow the next door neighbor who is helping out, and then I think we follow one other person, but maybe not. Maybe I made that up. But there's like 3 or 4 perspectives that we're following. And there's all these like little hints, and I liked seeing this like crazy intricate plot figured out. So this is an author that I've never read anything by, but I would definitely give another try to, because like while this wasn't the most amazing thing I've ever read, it was a lot of fun. It was really short, like it wasn't that long, and I was like invested in this. I was really interested to see how it was going to go. This is your like domestic thriller kind of vibe. So if that's your thing and anything I'm saying sounded interesting to you, then I would definitely check it out because I quite enjoyed it. There are a lot of conveniences with the plot, though. Like, once I had finished reading it, when I was reading it, I was having a grand old time. There's a couple of moments that I went, well, I don't know about that, but I chalked it up to it's fine, and I moved on. Afterwards, thinking back and like talking about the book, there were a lot of like plot holes and things that like didn't quite add up for me, but didn't take away from my enjoyment of reading it. It was one of those things where like I was in it, I was invested, I was believing every single thing that was going on. It was in hindsight that I would look back and go, okay, well, that instance, that was a little too convenient, and oh, this thing over here, I don't know if I believe that. And so I think if you are in the mood for a thriller that doesn't take a lot of thinking, that doesn't take a lot of like necessarily brain power, you're just kind of like vibing with it, this is definitely your thing. Like, you're going to enjoy this book, but maybe like don't give it too much credit, because like I said, there were just some conveniences and things that they threw at the end that I didn't love. Also, I know I mentioned it in the triggers, but like birth trauma is a huge part of this, because one of the events that happens in this book is the woman who ends up going missing, the mother. She's a doula. And so right before she goes missing, she is part of a very, very, very traumatic birth where the doctor does not listen to her, and just kind of like does what he thinks is right. So that made me, as I was reading that, I've never been more grateful for my birth experience, because that was absolutely terrible. So if that, like, I just wanted to pinpoint, like, highlight that, because if that's not something that, like, you can handle, it's a really big part of this plot. So just kind of be very aware before going in and making sure you're in the right headspace to read that, because you are in the doula's perspective. You're never in the mom's perspective of, like, who's going through that, but she's in the room and she's talking about what's going on. So just kind of like be aware of that, because that is a particularly hard part of this plot. But otherwise, it was a fun, enjoyable time. I'm never gonna like probably think very hard about that book again, but I enjoyed it while I was reading. The next book I picked up was Godmersham Park by Jill Hornby. I had to give this one 4.5 stars. Trigger warnings for medical procedures at the very, very end. They have like our main character has a medical procedure, and it's maybe a little botched, and so just kind of, it's a very, very teeny tiny part of the plot, but it did like stick in my brain. So just be wary of that. This book follows Anne Sharp, who's a governess, and she gets hired at this place called Godmersham Park, where one of the Austen brothers resides with his family. And their oldest daughter is 12, I think, when this book starts. And Anne is hired. She's a gentleman's daughter, and she's had a rough go of it. And she's hired as a governess for this family. And at her time there, she meets Henry Austen, who's another brother, and Jane Austen, the Jane Austen. And this is based on history, because this place did exist. It was actually owned by this Austen brother, and they have daily journals of Fanny, who was the young girl that our main character was the governess for. But I mean, it's a 12-year-old girl's diary, but still, like, the events of this book actually happened. It's just like all the other in-betweens that may not have. I loved a lot of this book, but I also had problems with this book. I think my very favorite thing about this book is the writing. If you are a fan of Jane Austen, like if you are a fan of the way that Jane Austen writes, you're going to enjoy this, because it's written very, very similarly. Like, it is modernized, of course, a little bit, but it's written humorous, and like Jane Austen always had like the nuances and like humor like woven through her stories, and that's exactly what this book does. So it is like the vibe of Jane Austen is in here. I want to read other things by this author because I enjoyed the way it was written so much. There were moments where I laughed out loud. I think this was written very, very expertly. I think Jill Hornby, there's been a few books by this author that are in the like vein of Jane Austen, so I think that she's probably done her research. I mean, obviously she had to do her research to write this book, but like has done her research in the Austen sphere as well, because like I said, it's just written so similarly without being identical. So it would be for fans of Jane Austen's works. I mean, obviously you'd have to be a Jane Austen fan to pick this up, probably, because like otherwise why would you care about a random governess? But you know, I don't know your life, maybe you do. Either way, I love the way this was written. The plot was a little boring at times. I feel like not a lot happened, and then at the end it got wrapped up so quickly in a way that did not necessarily make sense. Like, I know all the pieces, I know exactly what happened, but I do not understand why certain things happened, and some things did feel like conveniences. And I will also say the synopsis of this is a little misleading, because it does say that like Anne is going to have like this sweeping romance, and I personally do not feel like that is a thing. Yes, there's some characters that she becomes like really close with throughout this book, and there are some things that could lean itself towards a romance, but the romance is like such a back burner thing that like it randomly comes back up at the end, and I just felt like, why? Like, if they had just taken the romance out of it, I would have been fine. This book would have been great. Like, not a lot would have happened, but we would have had a couple of years in Anne's life, and Anne, like, as we watch Anne kind of like come into her own. She, like I mentioned, was a gentleman's daughter and has fallen on some hard times and has basically been forced to take a job, and so that's why she becomes a governess. And this is her first job, and so you see her kind of figure out how to play the role of the governess, because the governess is not part of the family, but is also not part of the staff, because like they're in that weird in-between limbo. So you watch Anne kind of figure out all of that, and how to become a governess, and what to do, and what she thinks that is the right thing to do is the right thing to do. So it's kind of a character study of Anne, but romance is such a minor part, in my opinion, of this plot. It bothers me that they like put it in the synopsis as like this big thing. It's really not. Otherwise, I enjoyed the story as a whole. I think you're kind of just have to be there for the ride. Like, it's relatively chunky, and I think it either needed to be a little bit chunkier, or a lot needed to be taken out, because like there's a whole thing with Anne's backstory as she's kind of like figuring stuff out. That was fascinating. That was probably my favorite part of the book. I was really interested to see where she had come from, and all the mysteries that she was trying to figure out about her past. So I overall enjoyed my time reading this. I'm glad I read it. I'm definitely going to keep hold of it. There's other books by this author. Well, there's one that I own, and there's other books by this author that I want to pick up. So I'm very interested in more things by her. I think this one, plot-wise, just kind of suffered a little bit at the end. I then picked up not 2, but also 3 of Happy Marriage, volumes 2 and 3 by Maki and Joji. These are the last 2 that I physically own, and I was trying to decide if, because, okay, I reread the first one in February, I think, is that right? Earlier this year, and it didn't hit quite the same as it did the first time, so I was nervous going into these because I wasn't sure about how it was going to work. I ended up giving both of these 4 stars, and when I finished the second one, I was like, let me just go ahead and finish, like, go read the third one and see. That's all I've got, and then I can decide whether or not I want to continue. And I have decided that I am going to continue, but there are some situations between our main couple that feels icky to me, in the sense of like, it feels like he is forcing himself onto our main female lead, and she's okay with it, but is also really, really naive and doesn't understand what is happening half the time. And so that is a relatively normal dynamic that I have noticed in a lot of mangas that I have discovered. So I'm going along with it for now, but if it ever kind of crosses a situation, especially because like now our characters have kind of like figured out their feelings. They're just not talking to each other about them, but they've kind of figured out their feelings. And so it's no longer a question of like, is she into it? Because like the answer is yes. Yes, she is. But I'm still kind of giving it the benefit of the doubt right now. There's only 10 volumes, I want to say, but if they ever go into a situation where I'm not 100% comfortable with, I will stop. I am interested to see where it's going to go, and we're going to see if it's worth it. I'm just kind of going to go 1 volume at a time, and we're just going to see what the vibe is. This series, I'm realizing I probably didn't tell you what it's about. This series basically follows our main 2 characters. Chiwa is the woman, and then Hakuto is the guy. So Hakuto is the president of this company, and Chiwa works there and has like no interaction with him ever, but gets called to his office because her grandmother, I believe, did a favor for the grandfather of the CEO. And so to pay her back, he's basically like, you shall marry my grandson, and we'll take care of any kind of crazy debt that your father has, father has, and you'll be well taken care of, and that's my way of thanking your grandmother for you. And she's like, okay. And so she goes along with it, and it's the two of them kind of figuring out what that means. Do they have feelings for each other eventually? Do we want to be married, really? Because they both have reasons for agreeing to this marriage, but they also keep this marriage secret because, again, he's the president of this company and she's just kind of like a random worker, and it would not look great. So far in these 3 volumes, her personality has changed in a good way. Like, she's become a little bit more comfortable with who she is and a little bit more strong in her convictions, and like has confidence. That's the word I'm looking for. She does have confidence now. Not a great amount of it, but she has more than she did when she started. And so I think I'm going to hold on to these for now, and we're going to see how the series continues, because I do like the romance between them. It's very, very tension filled. And after that first volume, it does get better, like I mentioned. So I feel very iffy about this series. Like, I'm not sure how I feel about it, but so far I'm giving it a shot, and then I can decide as I go along whether or not it's worth continuing. Right now, the answer is yes. Yes, it's worth continuing. I have the 4th volume ready to go. The next one is my 5-star, and ironically, it's the sequel to my other 5-star. I had 2 5-stars this year, and it's already April. It's fine. And that is the second book in the Millicent Quibb School of Etiquette for Young Ladies of Mad Science by Kate McKinnon. This one is called Secrets of the Purple Pearl. I'll leave my wrap up for February, which is when I read the first book, linked above, because I kind of have a lot of the exact same thoughts. This book follows our 3 sisters, Gertrude, Dee Dee, and Eugenia. And the first book takes place in this town called Antiquarium, where they have basically been adopted kind of by this family. I'm not quite sure the family dynamic and how that works. So the family dynamic is confusing, but this family that's taking care of them lives in this place called Antiquarium, which is all about being polite and proper and posh and doing the right things and always kind of like going with the flow. And the 3 of them want absolutely nothing to do with that, and they keep getting kicked out of these etiquette schools. And the book starts with them basically being invited to join the Millicent Quibb School of Etiquette for Young Ladies of Mad Science. And Millicent Quibb is a mad scientist and is kind of like the boogeyman, if you will, of this town. And so the first book follows them as they become kind of like acquainted with her, and then discover that this town of Antiquarium is actually like their roots are based in mad science, and there's this real bad, evil mad science organization group that's kind of like hiding in the shadows and trying to get things started again, and they are trying to stop it. So this is book 2, and they are at this place called the Purple Pearl, which is a hotel that their family always goes to. So they basically end up there because Millicent Quibb is like, hey, there's some mad science, like bad, evil mad science shenanigans going down, and we're going to go and figure it out. And so it's super short. Again, like I've mentioned before, I highly recommend the audiobook if you are an audiobook listener. Actually, I recommend doing like the tandem thing where like you physically read as you listen, because it's just so humorous. And like Kate McKinnon adds these little like quips here and there, and there's a lot of footnotes in this book, and it's just more enjoyable to have that being read to you, because like here's a giant footnote there, because they're read at the appropriate times instead of you having to like flip back and forth. I recommend having like the ebook or a physical book to flip through, because there's like illustrations throughout, and multiple times in the audiobook they'll be like, hey, you have a PDF at the end of this audiobook, go check it out. All these things that I'm talking about are in the PDF. It's the mentioning and like talking about all of these illustrations throughout. It's just a lot of fun. It is the most unserious journey that I've ever been on. They're fun. They are like whimsical madness. And I love everything about it. There's definitely some things, it is made for middle grade, like a middle grade younger audience. So there are some plot things that I picked up on because I've read many things like this before, and some of the clues are a little bit more obvious to me than maybe they would be for younger readers. But there's also some stuff that like I totally miss, and I really don't know how I missed it, but I did. I just really enjoy it. It's just a lot of fun. It's a lot of kooky, good fun. Think like the weirdness of a series of unfortunate events, or like the unseriousness of a series of unfortunate events, with mixed with like happiness. Like they're orphans, but they're like happy. They're not like, it's not as depressing a story as like a series of unfortunate events is. But it definitely has it's just fun. It's just fun. And you have to go in knowing that like these situations are absolutely insane. But this book, we get a lot of backstory about the sisters, and we get a lot of like more fantastical twists to it, and I so enjoyed it. So 5 stars. Will not stop raving about this. Honestly, there's a very good chance that those books will be on my favorites of the year because I thoroughly enjoyed them. The next one is a super random one that I've had on my TBR for a while, and I just picked it up. It's a graphic novel memoir, and it's called The Fire Never Goes Out. It's by N.D. Stevenson. I ended up giving this one 4 stars because, okay, first, hold on. Trigger warnings for self-harm and depression. This is the author who wrote Nimona, which I absolutely love. They also have done a lot with the Lumberjanes, and I read that series. I haven't finished it. Actually, I'm realizing that there's definitely a handful of volumes that I have not finished. I don't know why I stopped reading those. But, like, this is a graphic artist who does a lot of stuff. They've done their own, like, graphic novels and things. But and in the course of this memoir, I learned that they have also helped with, like, Netflix shows and have done some covers of other books and things like that. I liked this a lot for the reason of how it was formatted. It was basically over the course of 2019 to 2020. I think it was less than that. I think it was 2013 to 2019 because it ended before COVID. And it was just kind of like a snapshot of like, this person used to write on Tumblr a lot, and I believe that they would put these like end of the year recaps on Tumblr, and it's just a collection of that with a few other like random graphics or like comic strips thrown throughout. They've done. So it definitely talks about self-discovery. It talks a lot about depression. Mental health is a big thing. It talks about this person kind of like figuring things out for themselves. And it was just a really interesting collection of stories. Like, here's a snapshot of what happened to me in 2016, and it would have like paragraphs where it would talk about some things, and then there'd be like some random comic strips that they've done thrown in, and then they'd actually have like pictures of stuff going on in their lives. I will say I think this is very beneficial for the author. I think this was definitely very cathartic for the author to get all this out there. I also feel like this would be really beneficial for someone who is maybe in the same job or going through the same kind of like mental health struggles, and seeing someone go through those and kind of figure out how to work through it and survive it and that kind of stuff. I personally feel like I just enjoyed the ride. There wasn't a whole lot that I personally connected with, but that's because of my personal experiences in life versus the author's personal experiences in life, and they're different. I don't know. I just found it really interesting. It was a really interesting story. It was a memoir, so it's this person's life. But I liked the way it was formatted. I found that the most interesting part. And then I finished the month by reading Park Avenue by Renee. I'm gonna see. Okay, I was told that it was Renee Attier, but the audiobook narrator said the name differently. So I apologize if I have gotten this wrong. This is an author that like is a name I've seen a lot. It's one that since I've been on BookTube, actually, this is a name. But this is this author's first or debut adult book. So I'm so interested to see what other things this author's going to come out with in the adult genre. And I so enjoyed it. I gave this one 4 stars. I will say trigger warnings for homophobia. This book is like Crazy Rich Asians meets a mystery thriller. A mystery. I'm not going to say it's a thriller, but a mystery. So we follow our main character, who's Jia Song, and she comes from an immigrant family. Her parents owned a bodega and have done pretty well for themselves, and so she's a lawyer and has gone to school and is like works at a law firm, has just made it junior partner, and gets put on this case by one of the partners to basically be like, you've done some good stuff. I need some help. There's this family called the Park family, which they are very, very rich. They own like one of the most well-known like beauty companies out there, and it's this couple and their 3 kids, and the husband is trying to divorce the wife, and she has cancer and is dying. And so it's these 3 kids who come to the lawyers to basically be like, my dad came with this document saying that they had only this much money, and we all know that's a big fat lie. There's so much more here that he's not telling us. Please investigate and figure out what is going on, because there's something behind the scenes that he is not telling us. And so it's her, Gia, dealing with 3 very, very different personalities, as well as the mom, who doesn't really want this whole thing now that she's at the end of her life. The dad, who's an absolute jerk. And then also there's this other guy who's kind of like the personal assistant for the mom, who Gia finds very attractive. The whole book is Gia trying to figure out what the heck is going on, but also like who to trust. So usually books like that have like, I'm not going to say this is an unreliable narrator, because it's not. Gia is reliable. It's Gia trying to figure out who to trust, and that gives it that feel of an unreliable story. And that's only ever worked once for me, but now it's worked twice, because it should not work. Like, there's something about like the unreliable narrator that I just cannot trust that vibe, and I don't like not knowing what's going on. But the way it was done in this book, I think, was very well done. It had me guessing to the very, very end. The way this book ended, I was shooketh. My brain broke at the end of this book because of all of the different pieces falling into place. And this is not a particularly long story, but so much happens in these pages. It's a little chaotic in the best way. Because of that, the pace felt a little off at times. Like, I was hooked immediately. Within pages, I was like, oh, this is going to be a ride. I'm so excited. And then there was a little bit of a lull in the middle, at least for me. The plot didn't lull. Things were still happening, but I think we had less exciting moments in the middle of it while she was collecting this information. And then as we get closer to the end of the book, things really started to pick up again, and I was again like really invested in the story and trying to figure out what was going on. So if you like super messy, chaotic families, not trying to figure out who you can trust, families that have secrets upon secrets upon secrets upon secrets, and our main character trying to do all of this while fighting feelings for someone that she really shouldn't have feelings for, this is a book for you. Please give it a shot, because it was so good. And then come yap to me about the ending and your thoughts on it. Because I said, that's not how this is going to end. There's no way. I don't believe that. And then they did the thing that I thought they would never do. So please read it. Those are the books that I picked up in the month of March and read. I hope you enjoyed. As always, let me know if you've read any of the books that I have mentioned, or what something that you read over the course of March that you really enjoyed, or you need to rant about. Both are fine. My comments are open. Feel free to rave or rant about books to your heart's content. If you want to comment something, but you're not sure what to comment a purple heart for the purple pearl. Well, if there's a pearl emoji, you can also do the pearl emoji. I genuinely don't know what emojis are there, but I'm going to say a purple heart or a pearl, because that one was just so good. Otherwise, that is all I have for you guys today, so I hope that you enjoyed, and if you did, don't forget to give it a big thumbs up, and subscribe down below if you want to be part of this awesome, growing family. I've also got all my social media down there, as well as other fun bookish links, so check all that out, and I'll see you guys in my next video. Bye.